Welcome to the Young, Dumb, and Love podcast, where we talk about all things marriage.
Our goal is to help equip you to have a marriage that is better than you have ever imagined by sharing real-life experiences, getting into the nitty-gritty, and sharing practical ways you can start today. Let's dive in.
We were young, we were dumb, and in love, but we knew this was made for
Welcome back to Young, Dumb, and in Love. We're so glad you guys are here. Brittany,
Yeah?
it has been a great week so far.
Yes,
You've been
it has.
super busy. I've been busy.
Yep.
Things are moving forward. And, a lot of times it can just seem like with the busyness, we get disconnected, right? And you literally just told me, it's like, I really feel like we haven't spent much time together. And I'm like,
We really
100% agree.
That's okay.
We've been both just
Every once
running
in
a
a while.
million miles per hour in all directions. Plus we have
Yeah.
all of our kids' stuff. But that's the
Yes.
cool thing about marriage. That's what I love about marriage, right? It's one of those things where if you truly make it a partnership and you look at each other as each other's helpers, like we talked about last week, we are here to just look out for each other. So when we're busy, things are going on and that's crazy. Like it's so easy just to stay connected, even though maybe we didn't have like great quality one-on-one time
It's
this
easy,
week.
but it's intentional. You know what I mean? I
100%,
think that's
yeah.
the thing is like, we do it on purpose.
Yes.
Like we check in on purpose.
Yeah.
Because we could definitely just be like,
Yeah.
not check in.
Well, and
but that
that's-
has a lot to do with just what we've built over years.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to talk about today. That's why we talk about this a ton.
Yeah.
And people always ask us like, "What are you most passionate about?" And
Communication.
the number one answer at
Always.
all times
Yeah.
is communication is the most
Yep.
important part to have a successful and long-lasting marriage.
Yeah.
If you don't have good communication, your marriage will struggle. And that's the thing. Like, if you continue to not talk and communicate with each other, things will fall apart.
Yeah.
You will grow apart from each other. But the more you communicate, the better your relationship will be. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. Break it down just a little bit.
Just a little,
in all aspects. How does communication affect our marriage?
Yes. Well, I think, obviously there's a lot of things that are really important, but when it comes to marriage, I feel like there's just a few things that if you can get those things right, all of the other things are like a ripple effect,
Yes.
And
Yes.
so often when you and I sit down to talk through what we're going to talk about, we always end up coming back around to this like, well, if we're communicating well, then this thing actually doesn't struggle as much. Not that it doesn't struggle, but when it does, the conversations are easier because we've set up certain communication standards. We understand each other's communication, where in the past where we would bring something up, it would be defensive, or I would, whatever the reactions we would have towards each other, and then the conversation would be hard.
Yeah, for sure. Whoa. Sorry, my water bottle dropped.
Yeah. And so, when we were like thinking through, okay, let's talk about, intimacy. Okay, well, what has made our intimacy better? Okay, well, having better communication, parenting, because that's obviously a big stressor in our current season of life.
Yep, for sure,
having
for sure.
two kids. We have two daughters in different seasons of life. We have a teenager and then we have a younger kiddo. And that's a huge stressor, because you want just to parent well and to raise them the way that, God wants you to raise them. But because our communication has improved, those are at least a little less stressful. They're still stressful. But if I have something I want to bring to you, I know we can get to a good solution,
For sure. Yeah. And that's, when it comes to all of those things and communication, there's multiple things that we have to face,
things.
right? It's not just being able to talk to each other. Like that's very important. I think it's kind of like the root, right? A root of everything that we do. But it's also having understanding, having grace, having, looking at each other and making sure that we see each other as a partnership, that we're working together, that we want each other's best interest in mind, that I'm not trying to win and you're not trying to win. Like we want to win together, so there's a lot of things that go with it. But communication is the root, and that's where it all begins. And that's how you can continue to grow in your relationship with each other by having strong communication.
Yeah. Well, I read this thing that said that communication, actually marriage has nothing to do with, people always say it's communication, but it's actually this. And I'm like, I don't know if I believe that, because when you think about it, we're always communicating, always. Whether or not we're speaking, we're communicating.
Body language.
Our energy, our body language, how we're approaching things. And so a few, and like we have so many episodes on communication. So I'm like, I'm not going to go all the way back and talk about every communication style and how to approach different things, because we can tag them all and you can go back and listen to them. But really what I want to just, kind of have a conversation around is quickly saying, okay, if you can identify these things, this will help. But then how has having better communication improved our intimacy and like our parenting and stressors and finances, like those core things and big decisions, like how has having better communication helped us in these areas thrive?
For sure.
So, I mean, real quick, of course, it is imperative that you figure out your spouse's communication style. Like if you haven't already, like
start there,
figure it out, because that's going to help you approach your spouse better. And you're going to understand their reactions and the interactions. You're going to be like, oh, this is why they react that way. Or this is why I feel so frustrated, whatever that looks like. So really, knowing their communication style, knowing like their default, like what do they default to, that kind of thing. Those are like imperative. But
yeah. So let's start with intimacy. So intimacy is one of those things that
is your favorite thing to talk about. He was like, if we just always talk about this is the best thing to talk about. I'm like, no, we're not just talking about that all the time.
But it's a huge part of marriage. It's something that helps you stay connected. It's the most vulnerable place that you can be with your spouse. I mean, like, to me, it is a very, very important part.
Well, it's an important part. It's not just to you.
And even,
in general, it's very important.
And when you look at like what people are saying and their struggles and the things that, I mean, some of the craziest comments we've ever gotten from people is because of intimacy. And the things that they say is like detrimental. Like, it's crazy what people are going through because of the lack of intimacy or just not being able to connect with their spouse in that way. And so, I mean, one of the first things you can do, especially a lot of guys have a hard time with communicating how they feel, right? A lot of my friends, at least, and I know sometimes it's just hard to really get it out there and say what our needs are. But the best way to start when it comes to your intimacy and communication is just saying, hey, here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I need. Like just being able to have that open and honest conversation, and having you guys being able to sit down and being like, okay, what's realistic? Where are we really at? How can we really do this and have a good, healthy, intimate relationship with each other? When you sit down and you kind of lay the ground rules for your marriage and you discover what that is for each other, I'm telling you, you're going to set yourself up for success. You're laying a foundation for what that is, right? Why are you looking at me like that?
Sometimes when I watch you talk, it's just funny. I don't know. The way you're talking in the microphone, I'm sorry.
He's going to twiddle my thumbs now.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I think, when you've learned how to communicate well, then when you sit down and talk about intimacy, then the conversation is a lot less uncomfortable and you know each other's heart, right? Because I think that's a huge part of communication is when you know your spouse's heart towards the situation, it's a lot easier to receive what they're saying.
So true.
So I think it's true. It's like, what season are we in? We're not newly married with no kids in the house.
Yeah, that's a totally different world.
You have to have a conversation around intimacy. And I think, we've talked about like, what to do if your intimacy is struggling. And this is where honest conversations are so important, and we've talked about like, okay, what is the frequency that you expect? And one of you might be like, I expect it this many times a week and I would expect it this time. Well, what's going to be a realistic amount? You know what I mean? And I think when you can just start the conversation, and sometimes these conversations at first are going to be super awkward.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Because there might be a frequency. There might be a desire that your spouse wants to discuss. Like, hey, I would really like if fill in the blank. But your marriage is that safe space. And we've talked about cultivating a safe space. But
true.
That's why the core of being able to communicate with your spouse, and having those check marks, those not check marks, but checkpoints. Like, hey, let's talk about this, and knowing the right moment. Cause so much of communication is this a good moment to discuss this? It's not a good moment when everyone's yelling and screaming, or you've had a long day or work's been hard, but it's like learning how to communicate, having common sense, being aware, and so it's helped us because I feel like we are very honest about our needs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Very.
not like, and it's not in a like offensive way, not like a, I really need this because you haven't been giving it to me, but it's like hey, it's maybe been longer than I would like. This is definitely what I hear. It's been longer than I would like. Can we make time for this?
Yeah.
Instead of like, well, you haven't done this in a long time. And
Exactly.
so much of these conversations is how you say it.
Yes.
Right? It's not what you
Absolutely.
say, because you're probably right. It's been too long and I should do my wifely duty.
That's so true.
so true. But it's saying like, hey, I know we've both been really busy, but I want to make sure we're making time for this. Like, can we make time for this?
Yeah.
But it's the communication aspect of it that has been a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the lack of communication, unspoken desires or unspoken, whatever expectations,
Yes.
that would give a good way to say it. Unspoken expectations can lead you to a place where you're going to make a really bad decision that you don't want to make. And because you're not being fulfilled and all this stuff. And it's a poor excuse. And I don't, I pray to God that never happens and we never get to that point. And like, I'm just saying,
It's not going to happen, sir.
I know it's not going to happen,
literally.
but I'm just saying it happens to a lot of people that I never thought it would happen to.
It does. It's true.
But on that note, it's important that you do have those conversations, because when they're unspoken and you don't talk about it, you don't have those hard conversations, you don't have those realistic conversations. What does this really look like? A lot of times that's what leads people to infidelity. And because we have a flesh and we have desire and we have all these things, and all of a sudden we're like, wow, I want it so bad and I need this so bad, but she doesn't want to anymore. And it's been 6 months and it's been a year and it's been, and it just goes on. And all of a sudden you find yourself in a place that you don't want to be.
Yeah.
And we always talk about how the enemy comes to steal, kill,
and destroy. I got you.
We always talk about how the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And he doesn't just come in like a wrecking ball. That's not, honestly, that's not really how it happens most of the time. No. Most of the time, it's just the slow creak.
It's subtle.
And it just slowly comes on, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a position that you never thought you would be in.
Yeah.
And so it's so important to have these conversations, because it's going to set you up to have success in your marriage when it comes to your intimacy.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, since we've become better communicators, our intimate life has gotten much better.
So true.
And it's just true. And and it doesn't feel as embarrassing and it shouldn't feel embarrassing. That's the thing. It's not meant to feel embarrassing, but I feel like the more we've been able to communicate and the more we understand each other, it has just made it more intimate and closer, and and also being together longer.
So
but
true.
Expressing those needs, and being honest, and also being willing to maybe have tough conversations of like, hey, whatever it looks like, or no, I'm not comfortable with that. And remembering that like your marriage is yours and you protect that, and it's between you and your spouse, and God designed it to be good, and that's what he wants for you. So
true.
Well, and just like communication, a lot of times intimate needs are different too. Like communication styles, and then there might also be like an intimacy style. Like, and I've never unpacked that whole thought, but there might be an intimacy style.
For sure.
There might be like anytime, anywhere style. I feel like that would be one. And then there might be more of like it's a little harder for it's
a little bit
like
more
yourself
of a mental game.
To get in. Mental game, which I think not all the time, but is kind of for women, a lot of times a mental game. We're always on in the brain. So then to come out of that for a moment, to be able to enjoy that moment. But I think, it's great.
And communication and intimacy is not just about expressing your needs. Like that's not what that is. It's also expressing, hey, I actually really love it when you serve me in this way. I'm not talking about intimacy right now. I'm talking about what leads to it. your eyes.
I was like,
But I really love the things that really get me in a place where I want to be with you in that way, are these types of things.
I didn't mean to roll my eyes. I just literally rolled my eyes.
But it's true though. It's true though. Like, I don't know if you ever seen one of those reels and the guy's like, the best kind of foreplay is, you know, doing the dishes and making the bed
100%,
and taking out the
which
trash.
we've totally talked about
and
that.
the woman's around the corner and she's like, ooh, wow. And then she jumps on him. Like, that's realistic. We need to know the things that work for you. Now, for me, you just push start and I'm there. You're like, it's just no problem, not an issue whatsoever.
I'm sorry.
but
it's what we've talked about.
Different.
The microwave crock pot. It's like such a great analogy. Is, you know, often men are microwaves. You just beep and they're good.
Yeah.
Women, it's more of like a slower cooking, for a lack of better analogy. But so yeah, I mean, communication definitely improves your intimacy.
That's right.
You know, and intimacy isn't just the act of, you know, being together physically, but it's how you're treating each other. It's the romance of it, you know, and that also improves. And so much of that is communication. Like, you know, are you communicating romantically? Are you being kind? Are you being someone who they want to be intimate with? And I know you've asked that question before, but you know, are you being someone that they want, that they desire, that they feel vulnerable enough to do that with, you know? And so these are, and I'm not like shaming anyone, like saying, are you doing this? But it's questions you have to ask yourself.
It is.
And I think it's so imperative to communicate with yourself. And I think we forget that, like, communicate with your spouse and it's important. But are you communicating with yourself? Are you asking yourself the right questions? Like, hey, how have I been treating my spouse? Have I been serving them well? Have I been showing up for them in areas they need? Have I been asking them how things are going?
Self-reflection
and a lot
is
of
probably
time
one
that
of the
takes
biggest
a
things.
lot of humility too. But when you do that, it just makes a huge difference, you know? So
that's so true. And that's hard. Self-reflection is very, very hard when it comes to this because we're naturally just selfish people, right? Like I naturally just want to think about myself naturally. And sometimes I'm like, when was the last time I actually asked her, how are you doing? Like, are you okay? What's going on? You know, stuff like that. And instead I'm just assuming, I'm jumping to conclusions rather than having the conversation, right?
Assuming, we all know what that is.
Yeah, assuming is not good for you.
Yeah.
It jumping to conclusions and not understanding where my spouse is at can be frustrating, you know, and I can take it personally. Like, I'll be like, what did I do? Why is she treating me like that? Like, I can't believe this is happening.
Oh yeah, you
We're not
do
connected.
get offended,
you know
and you
what I'm
make this little face. Oh my gosh! Like, he's all like, if I'm like feeling a little spicy, and it's not him, but
it's
he
so
just
funny because I've never seen this face.
Sometimes you're like, babe, what's going on? But this will be his face. I'll like say something, he'll go,
that? No.
Like our kids, you know, our kids make that face.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You make the exact same face.
I've never seen it.
When I like say something and I can tell it's like bother. You're like,
She says I have a lot of faces.
he makes a lot of faces.
I honestly
do too.
don't know what these faces are.
They're just.
It happens.
Anyway, so it improves your intimate life. Having good communication with your spouse is going to improve your intimate life. It's going to improve all aspects of your marriage, but it's going to make a big impact, you know, on that. And then also good communication when it comes to parenting. Woo-wee.
Well,
I think that's probably right now for us, like, I would say that's the most challenging.
Oh, for sure.
And our kids aren't challenging. The thing, it's more of just like knowing how to navigate certain situations. And like, we may not, like, we didn't have the same type of like upbringing. And so how I may handle things and how you may handle. So it's new. Like, that is probably the area of our life where new things come up the most often. Cause I'm like, well, I would do it this way. And you're like, well, you're not being strict enough or whatever. Cause I have a tendency to be a little more chill with parenting, maybe. I don't know. In a certain way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, nothing crazy. It's not like we fight about parenting because we don't, but sometimes it's like, I can tell that we're not agreeing.
There's some friction going on.
The kids are in the room.
And we're giving each other that look.
We can't argue because they're there, but I'm like, okay, I wouldn't have done that. But he's like, why aren't you being stricter? You know what I mean? So I think we probably communicate about parenting and like
the most right now.
Yeah. What do you think?
For sure.
Probably.
Yeah. Oh, for sure we do, because it's
like,
the
how
biggest
are we gonna
challenge
handle
that
this
we're
situation
in.
and being a united front, because it's so important to like, I mean, like our kids will see us like disagree on things. And I think that's healthy for them to see how we work through things. But I don't want them to think that we're like
always fighting.
Like fighting.
Well, and they're sensitive to
our kids. Oh yeah.
If they see us,
don't fight. I'm like, we're just like, talking.
If they see us,
not them. It's just the little ones.
Yeah. Well, if they see us like bickering, but we don't really like bicker. We kind of just like have fun
in a
bickering.
Funny way. Yeah.
And our youngest thinks, she's like, stop fighting.
Yes. Well, and just like parenting them with a united front when sometimes we have to like, hey, how, like sidebar, like, how are we doing this?
For sure.
Or do you agree with this? Because it's always like rough when like one parent goes like hardcore and the other one's like, no, we weren't at that level yet, you know? And then I'm like, but I can't like disagree, or I shouldn't disagree with them in front of my kid. But then at the same time, I'm like, slow your roll, bro. It was like one conversation. So I would say that's where we have to take our communication skills lately and put them into use.
Oh, for sure.
Where I'm like, okay, you know.
Yeah.
True?
For sure.
True?
Yes.
Yes. And
it is
we don't always agree.
Yeah.
I think there are probably some things
most
that
of the
we
time,
would do differently.
Totally.
You know, but we've found somewhat of a good groove. And it's hard too, because like communication and being aware of like what the need is at the time and understanding your kids' communication, but it all starts with like you and your spouse. Like if you can figure out, okay, what's working here.
Yeah.
That makes a huge difference.
Well, I have a few things that just were on my mind. Inconsistent communication leads to conflicting parenting styles. So like
that's true.
When we have inconsistency in our communication about parenting, it's going to do is conflict our parenting styles, and we're going to have a really hard time. Yeah. And
it's confusing for your kids.
It's so confusing
because then
for
they're
them.
like, I don't know the expectation really. Like this one thinks I should do this, and this one thinks I should do that.
Well, and how many times have we had our kids go to us and go, "Hey, mom, can I do this?" No. And they go to dad because they know
that you'll say yes,
that I'll say yes, or vice versa. It does go both ways. That's where we have to be consistent. That's why my go-to response anytime.
Have you asked your mom?
Have you asked your mom? Well, I'm like, so you did or you didn't? You know, I always say that. It's kind of my default, just so I make sure I don't go against what she says. Yeah. And that's actually huge. We've discussed that before. Yes. And so anyways.
Well, then they know. And like you said, inconsistency is confusing for your kids. Yeah. You know, and it's like your kids need to know the expectation. They need to know what you expect, what you're asking of them. And that means you need to come together with your spouse. And if you're not good at communicating together, it's going to be so confusing for your kids and in your parenting. And, I had a good point. And then the 80s, man. I'm trying to think. It had to do with our kids because that's what we're talking about. Yep. I don't remember. Yeah, but it was good. It was good.
Yeah. One of the things you said it earlier, you're saying like, you know, I think it's pretty healthy to have open conversation in front of your kids and dialogue. I think it's very important that we have, you know, we're not going to have like blow up conversations in front of them. No, like it's like a very serious thing. But if we disagree on something, we have open dialogue about it in front of our kids. And what it does is it helps our kids learn how to problem solve in their life. Yeah. And so that's a part of the communication style of what we do in parenting, like us having open dialogue and figuring it out as we go, allows them to go, oh, okay. So you can disagree with somebody and still love them. Yeah. That's amazing.
Well, I think that's the thing too, is like, think about this. Like I grew up and I heard people fighting. So whatever. But if you never hear like your parents communicating and working through something, then when they meet somebody, the first time there's an argument, they're going to think there's like trouble. Like, no, like I'm doing something wrong. No, you're learning how to communicate, you know? And
that's trauma. That's like, that's basically something that can be childhood trauma.
Which is crazy because it's like the opposite of what you would think. Like traumatic, you would think would be like scary or bad, but like traumatic, like not learning how to do that. But like in parenting, you know, I've seen a huge, I really don't remember what I was going to say. I had that really, like when the camera,
80s, man.
No, when the camera stops and I'm on a roll, it's like, just disappears because I had a really good point. But communication, our kids. Oh, okay. I think I have it.
Here we go. Let's see what it is.
And in parenting, learning, not just, I mean, of course, learning your spouse's communication style is key, but also then learning your kids' communication styles and then communicating with them in such a way that's helpful for them. Obviously not all the time, because they're going to have to learn to communicate
for sure
with the world around them. But learning that has been huge for us too as parents. Like one of our kids, you can be pretty direct with and be like, you need to stop.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay. And another one of our kids, if you say that, she might cry, you know? And
so true.
And so it can be like, oh, but it's the same thing. But learning that and understanding, and you know, that's been huge. And then something we do with communication that improves. Now, obviously we talked about how, you know, communication filters through and improves every aspect. I mean, it's a ripple effect, is like check-ins. We do it together, but we also do it with our kids. And it's been cool because our little one, when we sit down for dinner, she'll be like, okay,
she knows now.
The oldest person starts, you know, and it'll be like, what was the best part of your day? Or we'll say like, what's your home run? You know, depending, like the analogy wasn't hitting for them for a while, no pun intended, but you know, what was your home run? Best part of your day. And this is just a good way to teach them how to communicate, right? Like you're teaching them, like, ask people questions. So what was the best part of your day? What was like a good part of your day? Like, hey, this was actually cool. It might not have been the best part, but it was solid, right? Base hit. And then we'll ask them, like, was there a part of your day that made you feel sad or that maybe wasn't your favorite? And just kind of teaching them to express themselves and say, yeah, I didn't really like this part. This part was hard. But you know, this part was really good. And it's also allowed us then to walk through it with them. Like, yeah, this happened at school. Oh, tell me more about that. You know, and you could do that with your spouse. Hey, what was the best part of your day? Oh yeah, this great business thing happened. Da, 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 da. Awesome. Did you have any parts that weren't good? And you'd be like, oh yeah, actually this happened. And then it just opens up that conversation.
So true.
And so just starting the culture of communication in your home, like where we're going to talk about things. We're not going to sweep them under the rug. We're not going to pretend like hard things don't exist.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, we're going to be gentle in the way we approach them, but we're also not going to just pretend like they're not happening, you know?
So true.
And so
true.
Yeah.
Well, we're so grateful for everyone who was here today.
There's so much more I could talk about.
I know, but we're
going to have to break it up into multiple episodes.
Yeah, for sure. We can go on and on about this all day long, but we'll just keep talking about it in future episodes. But we're so grateful for everyone. Thank you for being here and being a part of Young, Dumb, and in Love. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow along, and just become a part of our community. If you have any questions, any topics you want us to go over, make sure you put in the comments, send us a message. We would be glad to go over them. We'd be glad to answer them if we can. But we're so grateful for every single one of you, and we'll see you next time.
We were young, we were dumb, and